Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. My name is Julian, and this episode's about the Stanley Cup winning Vegas Golden Knights. Now, if you have followed my preseasons in past years, I have done episodes for every single team in the NHL, all 32 teams, detailing all their players and who I think is fantasy worth drafting, where they're currently being ranked in fantasy, stuff like that. This year I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to have some pretty different fantasy content for the preseason, but a lot more ranking content, a lot more like who should you draft content, rather than just going team by team and just listing player by player. But I know a lot of you do enjoy that series a lot. That's why I'm still doing a few videos like that, starting with the Stanley Cup winning Vegas Golden Knights. I'm also going to be doing the original 6 teams for those kind of videos, and that's probably going to be it for that. However, these videos are really good because I go through the entire team and tell you, okay, this guy's worth drafting where he's currently ranking, and maybe this guy's being drafted really freaking low and probably deserves to be quite a bit higher. That guy could be a steal. Stuff like that. That's what this video is all about. Before we get into it though, guys, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I promise you this is the place to be for preseason content for fantasy hockey, and I promise you the season content doesn't disappoint either. If you want a little bit extra, you can check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. You get early access to videos and you get an access to my schedule, so you get to know exactly what I'm going to be posting and when. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes, let's take a look at what Vegas's projected lines could be. On the top line, I see Barbashev, Eichel, and Jonathan Marchessault. Could be a pretty deadly top line. Then Dorofyev, Chandler Stephenson, and Mark Stone. So obviously if everyone's healthy, Stone, has some injury issues oftentimes. So if this is a healthy lineup, that could be the second line. And then Brett Houghton, William Karlsson, and Mike Amadio potentially on that third line. On defense, Martinez, Pietrangelo, McNabb, Theodore, Haig, and Whitecloud, and then Thompson and Hill as the goalies. Let's jump into the content now. Let's start with the highest ranked Vegas Golden Knight player on NHL's top 250 list, and that is Jack Eichel, ranked at number 27. Now, last year, he finished around 28th in hits league and around 20th in non-hits league in terms of fantasy points per game. Now, that's great, but his 67 games are the closest he's played to a full NHL season in like 3 years. If he can stay healthy, this is a perfectly good draft position for him. Just keep in mind, though, that he is a natural center, which is a popular and easy position to fill later on in the draft. The next highest ranked guy is Mark Stone at number 53. Now, with Mark Stone, I'm very, very scared of another injury. They're claiming that Mark Stone is going to be fully healthy, but I'm not sure if I'm buying it. Over the last couple of seasons, he's missed over 80 games of action, so I'm not taking the chance on him this high in the draft. This is the ranking that he should be ranked if he were to play a full 82 games, and it just doesn't make sense to me to rank him this high when he's probably not going to play the full 82 games. Don't draft him here. Way too high. Jonathan Marchessault is being ranked at number 62 and is the next highest ranked Golden Knights player, had 57 points in 76 games last year. It's weird, though, to me that he's going as high as number 62. Usually, almost every single year, he's drafted around the 100 mark, which is always a pretty good ranking for him. Last year, he finished as the 77th best fantasy player with no hits, but about the 105th best fantasy player with hits in your league. We can expect a very similar season from him, probably next year again. And if he's being drafted in this range, though, I'd avoid him. But if he ends up being drafted close to the 100 that he's usually drafted around, he's a pretty good value. The next highest guy on their list is Alex Pietrangelo, ranked at 113th best fantasy defenseman. Last year, he finished as the 78th best defenseman in hits league and about 90th in non-hits league in terms of fantasy points per game. I have him as a top 15 defenseman easily this year. The block shots are really what boost him up the ranking. So if you don't have that in your league, which you really should, he's probably not going to be this good of a value for you. But a season like last year, guys, is definitely repeatable. He might get slightly less block shots, but there's nothing overly glaring towards regression. I do like Pietrangelo, should have a similar season to last year, which is why this is a pretty good value for you to draft him in if this is where he ends up going. Next, we have Chandler Stephenson, guys, and it's time to admit it, ladies and gentlemen, that Chandler Stephenson is a mother stud. He's piled up 64 and 65 points in consecutive seasons in Vegas and will maintain an important second-line center role in Vegas. Unfortunately for him, that doesn't necessarily translate to being a fantasy stud. In non-hits leagues, he finished around the 200th best player, and in hits leagues, he finished around 150. That shooting percentage and on-ice shooting percentage last year was a bit low, though, so he can actually do a little bit better than last year. So in hits leagues, he's still a decent pick at this range, but he's not an amazing one. And if you're not in a hits league, I would avoid picking him here altogether. Then Shea Theodore, ranked at number 45, finished 118th in hits leagues last year and 105th-ish in non-hits leagues in terms of fantasy points per game. Obviously, he did miss some time, but if he can stay healthy, he can definitely pay off this ranking. There were no glaring stats last year that will regress. Next, they have Ivan Barbashev, ranked at 168. And Ivan Barbashev is an interesting case. He finished around the 193rd best player in terms of fantasy points per game in hits leagues, which is where he shines. However, his value did increase a lot after he was dealt to Vegas from St. Louis. He scored 16 points in just 23 games, and his shooting percentage started to look a lot more like his career average, which was about 17%. So assuming he can keep up a similar shooting percentage the entire season, he'd finish around the 162nd best player in hits league, which makes him an okay pick at this range. Just don't take him in non-hits leagues though, because he's not really a top 200 player. Next we have Vegas's goalies, Logan Thompson and Adin Hill, ranked at 184 and 228 respectively. Now Vegas's goalies are a bit of a tricky situation this year. We still have no idea what's going on with Robin Lehner, though it's assumed that he's going to miss time still and probably the entire season. Even if he does miss the entire season though, both Thompson and Hill are very competent goalies. I do think Thompson gets the slight advantage, but Vegas could even opt for the Boston type strategy and split starts pretty evenly between Thompson and Adin Hill. I would prefer drafting Thompson over Hill, and I think he could end up being a pretty good value pick this late in the draft if he can stay healthy. Hill is also someone who can get a decent amount of starts and could be the number one goalie if Thompson struggles at all or gets injured. He's not my favorite pick at all in the draft, but at this range, going this late in the draft, I don't think he's bad value at all. Now, William Karlsson was not included in NHL's top 250 fantasy players list, which is crazy. Last year, he ended up finishing as the 195th best player in hits leagues, and even better, 141 in non-hits leagues in terms of points per game. And that's with a pretty low shooting percentage and on-ice shooting percentage. He could do even better this year and could definitely be a value pick near the end of your draft, or even probably picking up after your draft, since according to this, he's not a top 250 fantasy player. Yes, he's likely a third line center this year with mediocre wingers, but Vegas is very injury prone. One injury and he moves up the lineup to the second or first line. I think he can have a pretty nice year. If you want to just, throw a super late pick at him, don't mind that at all. Then Nicolas Roy is a pretty good player, but unless there are many injuries in Vegas, he doesn't have a whole lot of fantasy value. He'll likely start as a fourth line center or third line winger, which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, and I definitely wouldn't be drafting him. Mike Amadio, his stats are kind of inflated this year. 16.2% shooting, and still, that overall stat total, pretty lackluster. He's only really viable as a streamer if Vegas has a really favorable schedule, and there are a few key injuries. Otherwise, definitely don't be drafting this guy and don't really be looking at him. Next, I have Pavel Dorofyev, and he is a rookie this year. Did play quite a few games last year and was a point every couple of games. Now, if Vegas opts to play this guy in their top 6, which they definitely could, there's a slot for him there, as you saw with my lines earlier, Pavel Dorofyev could actually have some value. Am I throwing an earlier pick at him? Obviously not. But if you want to throw like a super late round pick in your draft at him, or even pick him up after your draft to see what he can do, I don't hate that. Obviously, if he plays with guys like Chandler Stephenson, he can definitely be someone to round out the bottom of your roster. I don't mind doing that at all. I don't think he's going to be otherworldly, but I definitely think he could be serviceable in the right situation. Then we have Alec Martinez, and he's only really draftable for categories league where you're desperate for blocks, which is really the only thing he's good for other than maybe plus minus. But his point getting days are pretty much behind him. And then Brayden McNabb is also viable in categories leagues for both blocks and hits, but don't expect a lot of points. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed the content today, please drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, guys. I'll be putting out content every couple of days this entire offseason until the season starts. So definitely, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button. Even hit that notification bell if you want notifications every time a new video goes live. Because trust me, it's going to help you to make the right decisions in your fantasy drafts. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.